everybody. Welcome back to my stream. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're watching this on YouTube or you're watching this on Facebook, please feel free to jump over to Twitch so that I can interact with you. I haven't set that all up yet, so if you're catching this on the video or the VOD and you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Like, subscribe, do all the YouTubey things. All right. So, don't smoke. We have a couple of things that we're going to talk about today. And if you've been watching my updates and stuff like that, then you know that I am probably, I don't know, maybe about 5,500 words behind what I should be right now. And that is not for a lack of ambition. I am just busy. Like, I've probably written, I don't know, maybe 25,000 words or more this week, perhaps more, in my stories. It's been very exciting, my other stories with the co-author. So I just, and then with my streaming and stuff, I've just fallen behind. But I did get a couple of things done. We're going to talk about a couple of things here, and we'll go through them. As you know, this is kind of a shorter stream. It's a special, kind of a once-a-week thing that we do just to kind of give you an update on what's going on and tell you a little bit more about stuff. Now, to my surprise, a few of you have actually asked me about Inner Sanctum, and I'm really glad that you are taking a look at that and that you're interested in that. I've got if you go to my About page, the link is there now. It's the very first tile that you'll see in my About page. It comes even before my image. So definitely check it out if you haven't. And we will go over some of the stuff that you guys have asked, because I want to address these things, and I really, when I'm doing my game streams, I really just don't have time to get into a lot of the details of what I believe is the reasoning behind some of these things. So I will do my best to address those in this situation. We're also going to talk about NaNo, which is still what we call it. We don't call it NaNoWriMo or whatever it's called. We call it NaNo, and that is what we're going to call it. So if you hear me referring to it, we're referring to the National Writing Month, and we will talk a little bit more about that as well. And then after that, we're going to talk about the progress in the story and some stuff that I've heard about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about publishing a book and all the freaking migraines that come with it, and how there's really 3 or 4 types of publishing. And I mean, if you get technical about it, there's really only 2 types, but if you get serious, there's about 3 or 4. And we'll talk a little bit more about publishing a book and some of the headaches that come with that as well, and what you can expect. So let's start off with NaNoWriMo, or NaNo. Let me bring up my desktop here and close this down. All right. So NaNo is a National Novel Writing Month, right? It's very cool. We went over it. If you want more details, feel free to check out the first video where we went in depth about what it is. This time what we're going to talk about is, they hit their goal, I believe. We're going to talk about some of the community rules and stuff like that. So if we go to the profile, you can see that it shows your progress, and it's got these are more like your favorite books, your favorite authors, and then you've got your book, which gets into detail, and some badges that you've earned during this process, and then you've got some personal achievement badges that you've earned. But let's jump over to their community and hit their forums, and you'll see what I was talking about last time. So in their forums, you have their official stuff, and then, their camps, because they do these camps that are really cool, where they they gather youth and they gather writers and stuff like that, and they just kind of go over these things. It's very neat. It's a really cool little thing they do to inspire youthful writers and stuff like that. They have the newbies section, which is kind of a cool area. I spent a lot of time here. They have like the welcome, and you can read the helpful tips and tricks and stuff like that. And here you can get into the rules and regulations, right? I think that's the wrong one. Hold on. Let's see. Pretty sure this is the... Yeah, here we go. So this kind of goes into more details about how the whole thing works and what it involves, right? So it's like, how does it work? And then it answers the question. So they go through some pretty commonly asked questions, which is really helpful. And don't smoke. Then they ask, they give you answers to various questions and stuff like that. So that's kind of how that whole thing works, and the forums and whatnot. And it's all right. They're not great. If you were hoping though that you could post your story on these forums and get people to read it or review it, you can't. I think they limit what you can write to about 1,500 words. Coffee. And they strongly discourage you writing your story. There's only very small sections where you can kind of give an example of your story, and then you can kind of appeal to editors and stuff like that. So it's all right. Really, the forums are meant to guide you. There's supposed to be some helpful community stuff. Like there is a group that I watch. Let's see. If you go to covers, right? This person is just a graphics designer, and all they do is they make covers for people that... Right, there's a better one, actually. Let's see. Shit. I don't know where the other cover one is, but there's a couple of groups that just work on covers. So you give them your story, and they help you with the cover, right? My cover's not from that. I just grabbed a cover that was free. It worked. It was easy to build, and I used that. And it's copyright free and stuff like that. I doubt I'll save the cover if I decide to publish Whispers of a Killer, but we'll see how that goes. So the next thing that we're going to talk about, unless you guys have questions, right? Ooh, let me bring up my... Nice. Thanks for joining us, Tineezy. Let me bring up my overlay. One monitor sucks, right? All right. So, now that we've talked about that, we'll go over to Inner Sanctum, and we'll kind of get into that stuff. One of the questions that I received almost immediately is why 18 years of age, right? Why are the forums marked at 18 years plus? And that was a question I received like the day after my video was released. And so let's talk about that. Let's get into that a little bit, and we will we'll go over some of these rules, these site-wide policies, and talk about why the forums are 18 plus. Because there's only a small section that is actually adult content, right? So why can't younger people write on these forums? Well, to answer that, I looked up a citizen's guide to the U.S. federal law at justice.gov. And because I didn't want to give you some half-hearted answer. So this is the U.S., but every country has their own rules regarding this, and some of those countries are uh, more direct than others. The U.S. can actually be kind of a little wishy-washy on this, but once they target you, that's it. You are completely screwed. So there's really no way around it. So if you don't have the 18 plus on your site and you're doing things or have a section that provides this kind of stuff, and you seem to be getting, not having any problems with it for a long period of time, it doesn't exactly mean you're not doing something wrong. It just means that you probably haven't been caught yet. And this is where we come into the Citizen's Guide to the Federal Law on Obscenity. And here's the thing. Anytime you have to describe any kind of adult content, and it doesn't have to be sexual acts or depictions of those kind of things, lewd and so on. It doesn't have to be that way. Anytime you're providing an area for people to do degrading, shameful, morbid, unhealthy, abnormal, erotic, violent, aggressive stuff, you are in the realm of obscene, okay? Or adult, we should say. And that immediately classifies you as an adult-based content. So it's not just people on the internet that are dealing with this rule. This rule is for everybody. Like, even movies have to do it. 17 plus, stuff like that, right? Books are sort of the same way. But your publishers usually take care of that kind of stuff. So this is why, right? This is why. Because the stories don't have to be erotic in nature for it to still classify as adult content. And we're not just talking about... I cannot tell you for sure this is why this rule exists for the forums. What I can tell you is that this is a very good reason why the rule exists. And it's probably one of the major reasons that they're using this rule. Because, as I said, it doesn't have to just be erotic, right? Let's say that you're writing a non-erotic story, just a fantasy story, right? Lord of the Rings. Let's take Lord of the Rings, for example. And you describe someone taking his sword and slamming it through the throat of another creature, and then you describe the blood coming out of the throat, the thralls of death, the gagging, the whole thing. You get into the description of all that. But we're talking about fantasy, Lord of the Rings. Surely that can't be 18 plus. It is. It does fall under the obscene rule, right? It falls under degrading, shameful, morbid, unhealthy, abnormal, violent content. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a big deal, and this is why, right? If they allowed people under the age of 18 to join the site, there would have to make massive changes, massive. There would have to be strict rules enforced all over the site. There would have to be all kinds of locks placed on other areas. It would just be a huge, huge problem. So that's why. It's nothing elitism or any of that stuff. It's not like that at all. All right, let's close this and get back into some more, right? So we dealt with that one. And then, of course, there's respect. And then there's role-playing. You can do your solo stuff. They don't allow role-playing in private messages, DMs, or conversations, right? So in this respect, again, it kind of comes to, well, why not? Well, because again, I have a strong standing that what is being done here is not role play, right? There's too much description, there's too much detail, there's too much depth for it to be considered role play. Role play is you walk into a house, you see this, you've got your DM guiding a story, right? And then you've got a character and a player, and the player has taken on the role of the character, and he is, going over the the story that's being presented to him. It's an interactive, back and forth, immediate kind of thing. Now, if that player sitting at a D&D table or something like that suddenly said, okay, well, let me describe how I look, how I smile, which is all pretty normal, right? But then he also says, I also need to describe the area that I'm at. I also need to describe the NPCs that are talking to me and interacting with me. I need to describe how they're interacting with me, how they look. That player is more like a DM than he is a player. And because he keeps doing this in depth, monsters, interactions, fights, combat, weather patterns, you name it, because he keeps doing this, he's no longer role playing. He's controlling and guiding the story, right? When you have two people doing this constantly, you have a co-written story. So I stand firm on the fact that we are not role playing. But anyways, the PMs, the DMs, and the conversations. So let's talk a little bit about that in the fact that these are public forums, right? If you're 18 and older, you sign up. You shouldn't be writing anything that needs to be hidden, right? That's the first thing. Like, your work shouldn't need to be hidden. If you're hiding your work because you're shy or something like that, you really need to think about what you're doing, because there's no reason to hide your work. I can tell you that the number of people that actually read these stories is not a great deal. I'm one of them. I definitely read the stories. I like them. But no one's judging you. No one's sitting there mocking you or anything like that. If they dislike the story, they're just going to stop reading it and move on to something else. If they like the story, they're going to keep reading it. You're not writing for an audience. You're writing for yourself and the co-author, and what you're writing should not be hidden. Again, it's a type of forum base, so there's no reason to hide what you're writing. And if you feel the need to hide what you're writing, then you're probably writing something you shouldn't write about. We talked about the 18 thing, but now we get into another part, which is a huge one, right? I cannot tell you the number of people that cannot grasp this concept, okay? Any characters that you're writing about need to be over the age of 18 years old, right? So let's say that you're a fandom writer, right? Let's say that you want to write about Dragon Ball Z. I'm not talking about, not Z, just Dragon Ball, right? I'm not talking about him growing up, him going to heaven, all that stuff. I am talking about Dragon Ball. You've got a little kid who is violently and aggressively attacking and being attacked by creatures from outer space, blah, 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 right? Pretty corny line, in my opinion. I wasn't a fan of Dragon Ball, but you get the idea, right? You've got a kid that's doing this. Anytime you play a fandom that has children in it, they need to be 18 years or older. They have to be. So that rules out what? What would that rule out if you need to be 18 years or older? It rules out high school. It rules out junior high school. It rules out children, right? It just rules out a lot of stuff. So you can still play Dragon Ball. You just have to age your characters up, right? They need to be older. Well, Dragon Ball did it. Obviously, it's possible. So there's no reason for you not to do this. So why is this rule here? Why is there so many, and believe me, children is an area where I get really, I backpedal like crazy, because anything involving children is red light, right? And the forums are really strict about this stuff as well, so I don't want to start writing something that breaches their rules. And so I get a little over nervous, right? I get a little anxious about the whole thing. But here's the thing. Once again, we've saw the rules for obscene, right? But you start to fall into categories of child abuse, fetishes of underage actions that are inappropriate, right? And could be misinterpreted. And so when you're dealing with that, you have to be super careful. You have to be, right? And because, again, it's such a sought after and universal crime that some states and countries are so strong about this that, like, you could get serious charges against you. So just don't do it, right? Can you have a child in your story, absolutely. You can have a child. Me, I don't tend to focus on children too much. My stories are far too dark. If a child did come into the story, it would be like a back burner kind of concept, like you know, these two had a child. It's being raised in the background, but it's not a primary focus of the character or the story. Obviously, no violence would take place around it. None of that stuff would happen. It's just like I have this concept where the child gets kidnapped because they want to hurt the Fey Lord, and when they go to rescue the child, it's just standing there with all these bodies around it that are all dead, right? And it just it it just kind of shows that there's something up with this kid, right? It's super badass. It's super strong. So you could do stuff like that. I mean, you kind of touch on the line a little bit, but as long as you're not getting too descriptive, like you can do stuff like that. But when it comes to, like, describing the child ripping throats out and drinking blood and stuff like that, you really shouldn't do that stuff. Okay, and then we go down to bestiality. Obviously, it's a crime. It's a crime. It's not just an American crime. It's a crime. So just don't do it. Just don't write about it. Don't do it. It's weird. Just don't. All right. Sharing content. So to sort of explain the next few things, let's talk about, like, the sharing content, sharing Discord, and sharing your personal information and encouraging people to do stuff like that. Well, there are a few things here. One, you're encouraging somebody to actively leave the site. Who the hell wants that, right? Like, you just, why would you do that? That's weird, right? You're trying to create a friendly environment that you can monitor and control and kind of make sure that everybody's safe and doing the right thing. And all of a sudden somebody's like, hey, let's leave this site and go over here and do this. Yeah, you can't do that. Another thing that you're not supposed to do is share personal information, right? Because this is not a social media site. This is a writing site. And if you're interested in social media stuff, then you should go to a social media site where you can post that kind of stuff, right? Obviously, you want to establish that you're being safe and you're being protected, because no matter how good moderators are, no matter how good admins are, there are limits to what they can do. And if you're throwing out your personal information, your address, your phone numbers, your names, your age, your just stuff like that, then you're intentionally putting yourself at risk, and that's something you need to consider. I mean, we don't do it on Twitch. We certainly shouldn't do it on other sites, right? Then you've got the privacy policy. So, and they go into bumping threads, and they go into the profile wall and spamming recruitment messages and stuff like that. There's another thing that I wanted to talk about real quick, and that is the copyright laws, right? And how they work. So I recently saw a story that I was directed to by one of the mods here that was really interesting, and it was about a romantic writer who is writing professional books, and she started on a type of fandom based writing service, kind of like this, only more geared towards adult content and strongly more homosexual in nature. Anyway, she started writing there, and then she became pretty famous, and she started releasing books, and they did well. And then another person started to do the same thing. And this kind of leads into a whole argument, and I'm not going to say their name or kind of direct anybody to that, because even the person that was reviewing this story, she went after them. So this woman is kind of is kind of a little insanely jealous, right? And very, very nervous. And so she decided to use copyright laws and stuff like that to shut down all these other romantic writers that were in her same genre, especially those that came from the site. But it wasn't limited to those. Like anybody that she felt was threatening her success, she would throw copyright laws at them, right? So how does copyright laws really work? Well, if you write it, it's yours, okay? You can copyright the depth of your story, but you cannot copyright the genre or the category of your story. It gets a little more complicated than that, but to put it simply, let's say that you write a story about a vampire who falls in love with a young girl. Okay, no problem, you can do that. There's a million stories to do it, but you can't copyright that concept, right? You can't say, this concept is mine and I'm going to copyright it. You can't do that. So what's another thing that you can't do? Well, let's say that you said that vampire was ancient but looked like he was young, and that girl that he fell in love with was a teenager, and you want to copyright that. You can't, right? So as you can see, this kind of falls into the whole Twilight situation, and there are tons and tons of Twilight books that came out that are not part of the Twilight series, because you just can't copyright the concept. You cannot copyright the concept. So what could you copyright in that situation? You can copyright the depth, right? Let's name our vampire Edward, and let's make a werewolf that, you know, also falls in love with this girl, and you start getting really, really close to the same story, right? Can you copyright that? Absolutely, you totally can, and you can point out the similarities there, and definitely push for it. So that's how that whole thing works. So what about your work on the forums? Is it copyrighted? Yeah. Once you write it, it's yours. And it's not just the forum saying that this is the way it is. This is the way it is. Once you write something down on a piece of paper, it's yours. So why do copyright laws and stuff like that? Why do you have to pay for them if that's how it is? It's a couple of things. First, paying for a copyright, it kind of solidifies that you did this at this time, and that you're not making it up, right? So that's going to make things a lot easier. If I said, hey, I already wrote this. I wrote this a year ago, and you know, I have it all here. This is fake, right? I need to be able to prove that, and just having a date on a website isn't going to cut it, right? Especially if that area can be edited. So I need to be able to prove, and paying for a copyright can help a lot with that. What's another thing that you can copyright? Photos, obviously, are copyrighted all the time. Music and all kinds of stuff. But you can do copyright. Do you need to copyright your books before you publish them? Not typically. So no, you don't need to go out and pay for a copyright on a book. You already have it. And that's pretty universally accepted in the writing community. All right, we also have a chat down here at the bottom, and you can jump into that and say hello and stuff, and then they've got some rules about that. So that kind of goes over some of the rules. Did I go over all of them? No, I did not. But it went over some of the ones that I think a lot of people had mentioned and talked to me about and stuff like that. So if you're interested in joining Inner Sanctum, by all means, come to the site. You'll find the link in my About page, and join, read, say hello, write some stories. It's fun. It's a good community. It's very active. It's very friendly, and I think you'll have a very good time. Let's talk now. Before we get into the story stuff, let's talk about publishing a book, right? Actually publishing a genuine book is a pain in the ass. It's a pain in the ass. So there are really two types of publishing, but I say there's 3 to 4, okay? There's self-publishing and there's publishers, okay? But if you break that down, when you get into publishers, you get into two more categories, right? There's high-end publishers and there's low-end publishers. And how you publish is going to make a huge difference. So let's talk a little bit about that and explain how that kind of works and the headaches that come with it. If you are looking for a publisher, okay, then you need to decide and be realistic about what type of publisher you are looking for. If you are looking for a high-end publisher like Penguin Books, then you're going to need an agent. And the reason you need an agent is because they won't even read your story until you have one. Your agent will contact them and deal with that, okay? So you're going to need that kind of a power to get into your high-end publishing. And high-end publishers are good. They're the best. They're the top of the top, right? You get the best monetary value. You get the best protection. It works out really, really well for everybody involved, especially if the book does well. Then there's low-end publishing. A low-end publisher you can submit your book to without a agent, but you're still dealing with publishing, and there's a whole bunch of problems with that. And there's also no guarantee you're going to be accepted. And if you are accepted, your terms and the deals that they give you are really not that great. And so it's not something you'll want to stay with forever, but it's a good start, right? Then there is self-publishing. And self-publishing is probably the most expensive of all of these, because you have to pay everything. So let's talk a little bit about each of them and kind of go over the benefits. Let's start with low-end publishing, okay? We're going to go to this publisher, and we're going to read some of the rules and kind of explain what this publisher does and what it is, right? So first off, this publisher is basically, when you sign with a publisher, they have a lot of rights, okay? They kind of guide the direction of your book. They guide what you can and cannot write. They guide how much you need to write, and they require the edits. They require the what is and is not cut from the book and stuff like that. They take all that power out of your hands. And so that's one step of publishing. You lose a lot of power when publishing, right? They also have some rules. So let's look at some of those. They have, they're unlikely to publish any story through a male point of view, right? I write through a male point of view. Actually, I write through multiple points of view. I have males, females, NPCs, stuff like that. I write through that. Why don't I write through a female perspective? Well, obviously, because I'm a guy. I don't know what it's like to be a female. I don't know what's going to relate to them and what's not going to relate to them. And it's pretty stupid for me to think that I should. I'm going to make a mistake, and that's going to hurt the overall story. So I tend to write through my protagonist tends to be male, and then the second protagonist tends to be female, and then I have all the NPCs as well, right? So already I can't publish. Now this whole we won't publish a story from a male point of view is extremely common in the romance genre, okay? Because they are under the belief that romance novels of any kind are almost always geared towards females. That's their primary audience. That's their main goal. So they don't want a book that talks about a badass dude that's, actively going out into the community and, beating people's ass, saving some chick, starting a romantic relationship with that girl, and then, creating a book from that. They want the whole female's perspective, right? This girl was captured. She's waiting for some guy to come and rescue her. It's already sounding more like a romance book, right? She's waiting for a guy to come rescue her like a white knight. You know, there he is. He's so beautiful. He's so gorgeous. He saves her. They fall in love, right? Sounds a lot more like a romance novel. That is because of this kind of nonsense right here. We don't publish through males' perspectives. So another one is they don't want books containing angels or demons. This is just them. I don't quite understand the problem here. There are plenty of romantic books that deal with angels and demons. Maybe they're trying to avoid religious undertones, which would make sense. Here they've got another rule that says they don't want things that take place in ancient times, like Egypt, Rome, blah, 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 right? Not sure what that is about, but if you look at most genres of romance, you'll find that they are heavily geared towards either fantasy or modern, right? And then they have, we don't want books that contains gods or goddesses as a primary mythology. So again, this probably falls down on the religion and stuff like that. They don't want transgender, male versus male, or female. This is pretty unique to this publisher. I can tell you that right now. This is pretty unique to this publisher. Most publishing companies don't give a damn about the genderification or sexual orientation of a person attempting to publish a book with them. They don't want any historical stories set after 1930. So if you are making a historical modern time story, they don't want it to be after 1930. So don't make a story in the 50s, right? And call it historic. And then they always they want any book that uses first person for an action. So they don't want you to use first person perspective views, right? They want you to use third person. So let's talk a little bit about that, because that's pretty common. In fact, a lot of people, especially forums, do this. So the first person perspective viewpoints are pretty simplistic, right? I opened the door and I looked around the room and I saw somebody sitting in there and I said, right? That's a first person perspective. You're talking as if you are the character and as if that character is doing these things. Then there's a third person perspective, which would be like, Trent opened the door, Trent stepped inside, Trent looked around, and what he saw was, so-and-so sitting over here in a chair, standing upright. He walked over and shook the person's hand and greeted him. So that's a third person perspective. And basically what that is that's you pulling out of the character and kind of showing the whole aspect of things. So third person perspective. In video game terms, which I know most of us are more familiar with, we already know what first person, third person is. Same concept, just in written word. What do they not publish? So here are some really, really standard, we won't publish this kind of stuff, right? They won't publish demeaning an individual or a group of people. That's pretty standard, universal across the board. Most publishers will not touch a book that is filled with hate. They just won't do it. They won't touch pedophilia. That falls back to a crime. So yeah, of course, they're not going to publish anything like that. That's universal. It tends to fall across all publishers. All of these tend to. Incest, brother, father, sister, daughter, stuff like that. So yeah, same thing here. This is universally accepted, but in the context that they're talking about, where it comes to aggravated sexual assaults and stuff like that, they're basically saying this can't be the focus of the story. So it can happen, but it can't be the storyline's purpose, right? So if a main character had something like this happen to them in order to build on that world, that might be more acceptable. if this is the focus of the story, very few publishers are going to touch that story. In fact, they probably won't take it at all. Bodily functions and whatnot, yeah, any kind of vor or golden showers or any of that kind of stuff, they're not going to touch. Necrophilia, obviously. Here's a weird one that's unique to this publisher. No guns, knives, or other stuff into female anatomy. What the hell, guys? Like, do people really write that stuff? That's crazy. No, I've never heard of that, and I've never seen it written on a publisher site before. That's definitely unique to them. So maybe they read something, and it was just so disturbing, they were like, oh my gosh, we're going to make a rule about this and never allow this kind of shit to happen again. No extreme brutality, bloody whippings, branding, needle play, asphyxiation, stuff like that. No bestiality. Pretty standard stuff. Really is. Is this talking about BDSM? Of course it's not. Right? They're talking about torture, and they're not going to allow it in their books. So, yeah. That's kind of how that goes. Then you get into the non-consensual thing, which goes into more of what I've already described. And then you get into have your stories been previously published? Let's say that you did previously publish a book, right? Let's say that I publish Whispers of a Whisper, Whispers of a Killer as a self-publish. And then I come back and I'm like, hey, this is a great story. It's doing really well. Do you guys want to publish it? They're saying that if you've already published it, they're absolutely not going to touch it. They are not alone in this, right? A lot of publishers will not touch a book that has already been published by somebody else or self-published. They're just not going to do it. It needs to be unique to them for them to get all the way into it, okay? Then they go into how to submit your book and stuff like that. So, what are some of the benefits that come from using a publisher, right? Well, let's talk about that. The first thing is they pay you. So a publisher takes away all the responsibilities that come with publishing a book. And that is awesome and expensive. Okay, so editing, for example, is one of the most expensive aspects of publishing a book. For real. It is super expensive and ridiculous. It is a very, very abused community, and people are definitely taking advantage of editing. And it's just very expensive, like 25 cents a word kind of expensive. It's expensive. And you say, well, 25 cents a word isn't that much, right? Well, it becomes a lot more when you say you have 100,000 words, or we'll do something a little more normal like 90,000 words, right? And then you times that by 25 cents a word, that's $22,000. So, I mean, that's a lot of money, And this is pretty standard for the industry. You can find cheaper editors, but it's pretty standard, and it's ridiculous. It is, I'm telling you, it's ridiculous. Oh, no. So, aside from a publisher editing your book at no cost to you, they also pay you, right? They take royalties. Oh my gosh, this lighter. Come on. They take royalties. In this case, a low-end publisher, they're taking 50% of what your book sells, right? And they that's their goal. Is that a lot? That's a lot. That's a low-end publisher for sure. That's a lot. Most high-end writers, right? Your Kim Harrisons, your Patricia Briggs, stuff like that. There's no way. There's absolutely no way they would accept a 50% cut on their on their book sales. I mean, you're talking about millions and millions of dollars. They're just not going to do it. So, what else benefits do you get from a publisher? They're going to do your art. They're going to do your printing. They're going to decide if you can do hardbound and softbound or just softbound. They're going to do all of that for you. All that stress, all that worry is gone. They're going to do all of it for you. but you're only going to get a little bit of money, and they have a lot of restrictions. So, what are some of the downsides to using a publisher? Because they obviously, all publishers also do one more thing, which is super important. They provide you legal protection, and that is super important. Okay, a book person like the one I was talking to you about says that you copyrighted their material, which was absolutely ridiculous. They say, you know, hey, this guy fell in love with this girl, and that's my material, and I copyrighted that concept. It's mine. If you don't have legal protection, that is an expensive process to get into a courtroom and just say you can't copyright a genre, right? Just to say that in a court of law where you're obviously going to be like, they're obviously going to be like, yeah, you can't copyright this, right? Just to do that is super expensive, right? Especially if you're being sued from another country, right? So definitely publishers help with legal, and that's important. What do publishers hurt then? Why wouldn't you always go with a publisher? Because publishers have a few things, right? They contract you, typically. They have all the rights to your book. So if they want it edited, if they want you to make changes, if they want you to add more, if they want to cut, they're going to do it. And you don't really get a say in this. So all control of how your book flows is kind of removed. So let's say that you wrote this book and they cut out like 4 chapters. And you're like, well, why did you cut that out? And they say, well, it's just fluff. We don't need that, right? But you, as an author, find that area not fluff. It's integral to knowing who the character is. It's integral to knowing what the character's doing. And you want it back in there. No go. If the publisher says you can't have that in there, you can't have it in there. They control the flow of things. Also, they, like I said, they tend to contract you, which can make things quite difficult. Let's say that I published Whispers of a Killer, and the publisher said, this is great. We would like to sign a contract with you. And on that contract, they write, you need to write 3 more books for us within a 12-month period. That's insane. That's insane, right? So would they do that? Probably not. But they would probably request that you write more books. And they may even take that request further and say that they need to be the same series, the same genre, the same characters, okay? And then let's say you kill off your female protagonist. The publisher can totally come back and say, you can't do that. You can't kill her off. You need to bring her back. She's a fan favorite. Don't kill her off. You need to bring her back. This is the kind of scrutiny that you're under. You're basically accepting a job, and you are working in that job. So what is some of the problems if you just break your contract? What could happen, right? All kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff can happen if you break a contract. Don't do it, no matter what. Give them garbage if you have to, but do not break a contract. They can sue you. They can copyright your material. They can take your material. They can prevent you from working with other publishers. Other publishers are already going to be frowning because you didn't fulfill your contract. It's just not a good thing to do. Just don't do it. All right. So let's talk about then self-publishing. Self-publishing is a little easier, right? Self-publish, if I can write. All right. So let's do self-publishing a book. I don't even need to look, and I can tell you that the top option here is probably fake. Here's the thing with publishers. If you're dealing with a very real publisher, somebody that's honest, okay, they won't charge you money. If you're being asked to pay a publisher, it's fake publisher. It's fake. That's not how they work. So it's kind of like an attorney that says he'll work on commission, and then midway through the case he goes, you owe me money. you're like, what? It doesn't make sense. Publishing is the same way. It doesn't make sense. They should not be asking you for money. If they are asking you for money, it's not real. It's not real. They're just going to take your money and they're going to self-publish your book. That's what they're going to do. So self-publishing comes with some benefits and some downsides. First, you're responsible for everything. Okay, you're responsible for the cover, you're responsible for the printing, you're responsible for the writing, you're responsible for the editing, you're responsible for all of it. All of it is coming out of your pocket. You're also responsible for the marketing. Now, there are people that are marketing masters that could easily accomplish this, but I can tell you right now, marketing a book is a pain in the ass. It is hard because people just don't care, and you're not going to have the clout to go sell your book in a Barnes & Noble down the road. So self-publishing is hard. It's really hard, and you should keep your expectations low if that's what you're going to do. I'm going to publish some work, and I have a publisher that's going to help with that. But overall, it will be equivalent to self-publishing. It will be like self-publishing, I believe. And so my expectations on these are quite low. Ultimately, I just want them out. I want them out in the world, written. I want to feel like, hey, I wrote that book. That's mine. And go from there. And once it's out, you know, maybe an editor or a publisher or another author reads the book one day. Could be years down the road. And they're like, wow, this was really good. I wonder if I can contact this guy and see if he's writing other stuff or if he's willing to write other stuff. So once it's out there, your options are open. You know, same thing with streaming and stuff like that. Once you're out there, it's just a matter of it could happen, and that's better than it won't happen. It could happen because you know, I mean, Mr. Beast could log into one of your videos and pay you $10,000, right? But I mean, is that going to happen? Probably not. Could it happen? Yeah, it could totally happen. But it won't happen if you're not streaming. It absolutely cannot happen if that's not the case. So that's what I mean by self-publishing a book. Keep your expectations low, and you know, go from there. Now, there are some benefits to self-publishing a book, and that is the profits are all yours. 100%. They're yours, right? That's awesome. That is awesome. You don't need to share them. You also have freedom. Right? I want my book to be 190,000 words. That's what I feel I need to write. And I want this book to have the goriest, nastiest, you know, brutal, just scenes I can possibly imagine. Cool. Nobody's going to argue with you because you're self-publishing the book. But self-publishing is extremely easy. It's extremely popular. And there are millions and millions of people releasing books every single day. New books are popping up every single day. It never fails. So when you have a market that is that massive, you need to market yourself. And doing that is very difficult. So I highly recommend that you do some research and you get involved with stuff if you want to self-publish. It is expensive, and it does take time. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. It takes time, especially if you want to do it right. And marketing, don't even get me started. You thought editing was expensive. Marketing is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous to market something. So that kind of takes care of self-publishing, right? You have your high-end publishers. Same kind of concept as what we already went through, except not really as expensive or as restricting, right? They give you more freedoms. So we did our talk. We've gone through all that stuff, and now we're to where I would talk about the story. Unfortunately, as you saw, I'm behind, right? I'm about 5,500 words or so behind where I should be in the NaNo community for the challenge, and I need to catch up. And I hope I can catch up this week. All I've really accomplished in my story is I efficiently and effectively wrote and finished a murder scene and the romantic scene. I haven't actually moved past that. So it's a new day, and I'm going to get past that. I'm going to move beyond that and get more into the story. If you guys have ideas or you have something you would like me to include in the story, for sure let me know. I think it would be fun to interact with you and see if we can include some ideas in the story and stuff like that. Leave a comment below or say something in chat. Jump on one of my streams and let me know. It'll be a lot of fun. All right, everybody. That kind of concludes our short. These are just short little catch-ups for the week. So that kind of concludes our stories and our stuff. I will do another one of these next Sunday. So do please join me for that. There's only going to be a total of 4, and we're 2 down. So join us next Tuesday for another Just Chatting, and we'll go over some other stuff. We'll talk about some more stuff. We'll talk more about IS, some Inner Sanctum stuff. We'll talk more about NaNo. We'll talk more about something. We'll figure it out. And if you're wondering, join us for if you want to catch my streams. The best time, if you're not interested in watching the whole game, is the beginning, right? Because that's when I do all my tech news and I do all the news of stuff that's happening and kind of share my views on things before we jump into the game. So we have a lot of tech news that came out this week, so we're going to talk about that on Monday. Until then, I'll see you all later. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody.